Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Real Steel E77, a Lianggang design. First off though, I want to thank my buddy Pete over at Cedric 80 Gear and Outdoors for sending this little guy along. It's an interesting knife, and finally got a chance to get around to reviewing it, so thank you very much for that, Pete. Next thing, let's do a quick little size comparison right here. Of course, we have to compare against your Spyderco Delica, another inexpensive, smaller flipper is the steel wheel cut jack 3-inch model right here, and of course one of my favorite budget knives, the Ontario Rat number 1 in D2 steel. So you can see this is an intermediate blade length, around 3.25 inches. So there you go, there's your size comparison. Next thing, this company, Real Steel. So this is a Chinese company. They are made by Sanrenmu, according to the internet, which actually makes complete sense. Because not only do you see shared parts among this, which is a Sanrenmu branded knife, and the Real Steel over here, but this knife itself was sold as the Sanrenmu 9054 at one point in time. Although interestingly, that model, although it's the exact same handle and everything, that was a slip joint sort of non-locking knife. So anyways, that's the deal with Real Steel. It's made by Sanrenmu along with Rake, these people. That's how they spell it. But anyways, that's the deal there. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little budget knife here. First off, on the good side, the size. This is a nice little size. 3.25 inches is a really sweet spot in my opinion. It's under a lot of the 3.5-inch laws. It's just, and it's got enough blade for pretty much anything, so I appreciate that very much. Next thing, this clip is actually, it's a nice clip. It's got plenty of spring to it. This one's maybe a little bit on the tighter side, but you know what? That's okay. It's got nice ramp to it, 100%. It allows 4-way orientation, so you can put it here, or here, which is great. It has a nice kind of deep-ish carry, and the screws are not so prominent as to prevent it from getting into your pocket there. It gets plenty of height over the screws, which is good. And so, yeah, there you go. That's nice. Next thing, this is using a liner lock, and it's very easy to disengage that liner lock. You can see they put a little bit of jimping on the inside of it there, and it's relatively thin, which means relatively low tension. But the thing is, it is secure, no freaking problem. So no concern about the line lock there. Next thing, the grind on this knife is actually surprisingly aggressive, which means, well, it will cut. That's a nice thing. I appreciate very much seeing. It doesn't look that way based on the sharpening choil, which they completely butchered, but this, it works. So that's nice very much. Next thing, this is a very grippy knife. You can see here that they've put jimping everywhere. They put jimping back here, here, over well, and then the G10 all over this guy, and I believe this is actually G10, because it seems to have the side of it looks legit. But this is really not going anywhere. So if you're in a Vaseline factory and you're on a budget, this is a knife to consider. And then finally, on the good side, the action on this guy is actually surprisingly good. It is I had assumed that this knife was running on washers. Then I took it was running on bearings. Then I took it apart, and it turns out to be running on phosphor bronze washers, which is actually impressive. It's a little bit harder to get a good unassisted flipping action on washers, and they did it here at this price point. And of course, that means that the knife is going to be maybe a little bit more gunk resistant and whatnot than a knife running on bearings. So honestly, that's great. And the action here, it flips very reliably 100% of the time. As long as you don't slip off the flipper tab, you are good to freaking go. And so that action there is absolutely very, very good. And so that to me is the good. And it's got a nice action, it's grippy, nice aggressive grind, allows it to actually cut things. Liner lock is easy to get to, easy to use, solid clip, and a nice little size here. To me, what's great about this knife is the price. This is a $25 knife, and that's actually really impressive. For $25, you're not getting all that much, particularly from the American brands, Chinese-made lines, whereas this guy is pretty damn good. And especially given that Real Steel and other Chinese brands can be much, much cheaper than, for instance, an Chinese-made Kershaw overseas in places like Australia, where Cedric 80 got it. That's a nice thing. And so the great thing about this knife 100% is that it's $25, and at that price, this is pretty compelling. On the bad side, first off, there's this little area here. This is not a bottle opener. Cedric 80 tried that. And it is a little bit sharp, actually, which is not something something I'm super in love with. What it actually is that like I said, the San Renmu version of this was actually a slip joint sort of non-locking knife, and they had a separate hole there, such that you could put like a nail or something through there, and that would prevent the knife from closing. That's a smart little idea, and it's an interesting way to circumvent locking knife laws. But the fact that it's left on this, I'm sure it was cheaper for Real Steel to just buy the design with that. But still, that's not something I'm super in love with, because it does definitely add a little bit of snaggitude and a little bit of sharpness to the knife. Next thing, the steel on this guy is okay. It's 8 CR 14 MOV. They added an extra MO in there for you. But the thing is, at this price, it's fine, but it's not going to be a super performing steel there. So keep that in mind. Next thing, this does have a pretty substantial recurve. And it's not like it's not a low-key recurve. This is a serious recurve. And at some level, I appreciate that. It makes it more of a design touch than a sort of non-committal recurve sort of thing. But this is going to be harder to sharpen with a lot of systems, particularly those that are based with flat stones. And so that is something you keep in mind. If you're planning to sharpen this yourself and you've got a system that is stone-based rather than rod-based, this is going to give you a little bit more pain. Next thing, this has absolutely got a quite little pocket pecker going on here, pecking on whatever's in your pocket all day long with this flipper tab, which is completely unchamfered. And you can see here there's no rounding or anything to it. It's not great. And by the way, this flipper tab could use just a little tiny bit of texturing on this face of it here, because you've even seen me slip off in a couple of reviews there. Next thing, the sharpening choil, like I said, they completely screwed it up. You can see the plunge grind goes out way farther than the sharpening choil, and although they did sharpen all the way to the top of it, the blade gets this little heel that kicks up there. It's just not great. It's slightly more okay with a recurve because the thing's already curving anyways, but I just still don't like that. Just make the choil a little bit bigger, we wouldn't have this problem at all. Then finally, actually, not quite finally, sorry. The thumb stud is very much in the slicing path here. But more importantly, the thumb stud doesn't need to exist. I mean, you can deploy this knife with the thumb stud, but the flipper on this and the flip in action is very good. It's tuned for that. So why are you putting a thumb stud on this knife at all? It serves no real functional reason, and it just gets in the way as you're cutting things. I'm not a fan of that. And then finally, the ergonomics on this knife just don't do it for me. Partly because the clip can be a little bit of a hot spot when it's placed in the tip-up configuration, but also there's just not a lot of beef in the back of this knife, and so I feel like although I've got a nice secure grip up front here, the back of it's just kind of wiggling around, so this just doesn't feel great in my hand. It just doesn't have enough junk in the trunk here to feel really satisfying, and so I don't love the ergonomics. It's very possible that somebody with bigger hands or smaller hands might find it more compelling, but at least for me, not a great thing. So that's the bad to me, is that the ergonomics aren't very good. The thumb stud doesn't need to exist because it's in the slicing path anyways. They completely botched the sharpening choil in a royal way. It is a pocket pecker for sure. The recurve, not for everybody. The steel is okay for the price, but not that great. And then there's this little thing, which is not a bottle opener, and frankly, without the hole, it's not anything at all, except a little bit sharp. On the ugly side, the only ugly issue here, although this one is actually nicely made, Real Steel does have some serious quality control issues. I've had serious issues with other models, and so I would recommend that you buy this guy someplace you can return this guy if need be. And make sure that you check things like centering and whatnot and lock up before you put the knife to work. But, that's, unfortunately, I've had to give that recommendation with a lot of companies, but just keep that in mind. Anytime you're buying a really cheap knife like this, you are very often going to be the quality control person, so there you go. It's the uglies, that Real Steel is not real about quality control. Let's go to the final conclusion, which is actually that this knife is pretty solid, all told. I mean, it's got a good action, it's got nice construction, a nice set of features, an excellent price point. Absolutely. I mean, there is a lot to love about this knife, and it is not a bad knife for the amount of money you're paying here. It does absolutely have some points of friction, though. It has a recurve that not everyone's going to love. It has a thumb stud that doesn't need to be, ergos that don't work so well for me. It's got this little guy, which just doesn't make sense in this model anymore. A blade steel that reminds you just that you did pay $25, and Real Steel isn't super real about quality control. But the thing is, for the price of this guy, particularly in non-US markets, this is actually a pretty reasonable choice. And so if you are really looking for a very inexpensive knife, for 25 bucks, this is a lot of knife, and frankly, it's a lot more knife than you're getting for a lot of other options. And so, particularly, like I said, where this guy is cheaper than other options, well, this little guy might be a real steal for you. Anyways, hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and bye now.